Ed, thank you so much for joining me today. Ed Harnaga, I've known you, I guess, for, well, not quite 3 decades, but almost, which is totally amazing.
That's great.
Um,
It's wonderful.
so,
Thank you for having me, Kathy. I really appreciate it.
well, I can't imagine anybody who can talk more about healthcare today and kind of where we're all going than you, Ed, because you've been on the agency side, you've been on the corporate side, you've worked with Pfizer during some very difficult times and in a whole reorientation of the company and its focus on science. So
Yep.
your background is really unparalleled, and I'm really grateful for us sharing thoughts today, kind of where healthcare is today and where it's going.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Kathy, and thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate it. But it's being with you on this that is an honor for me always.
So, why, I guess we can't ignore the fact, the big elephant in the room, AI.
Yep.
So, how in your, sort of recent experiences has AI been a change agent for you and,
Yeah.
have made you do things differently and sort of both change the way you think and some of your approaches and communications?
Sure. No, it's a great question. It's the thing that everyone is talking about. And I have to admit, when we first started rolling out AI tools at Pfizer, I was one of the key skeptics of how it would work in corporate communications, where the value would be. But I had a colleague who was a kind of on our digital tech side who really brought me along, kicking and screaming, but really eventually just really adopting and growing with the technologies and looking at it. So we've been using it in a number of different ways that I found exciting. I think the first and foremost, we had something that was, I think, industry leading a few years ago. We started bringing in an in-house ChatGPT model, and we started to look at it in corporate affairs and how we could leverage that better. And we were working with so many different repositories of documents and shared drives and other things, and everyone had different tools that they were using. And you can imagine when you were trying to pull together something, you're going into this document, that document, every single document to try and pull together a narrative, pull together a Q&A. What we did was we took every single piece of external content that we had across corporate affairs. This was press releases, Q&A documents, scripts, everything you can imagine, policy papers, white papers, and uploaded it into this ChatGPT model and created something that we call the Corporate Affairs Content Accelerator. And this tool just became fantastic. I think in the first year of operation that we had this going, we had colleagues keep tabs on how much time they were saving, and we saved about 20,000 hours of time. And it was just an incredible tool. And what we did eventually was to roll it out to not only in corporate affairs, but to our top leaders in the company, the leaders that are out on the front lines, speaking at conferences, going to meetings. They were able to use this tool instead of asking us for a Q&A document or asking us for talking points, to be able to pull something together themselves that was referenced and they could understand where they were. So that was a great first use case. I think the other two areas, there's two other areas I'll mention. One is in mis and disinformation. I think that for Pfizer has been a huge challenge in how we manage it, how we respond to it. And you can imagine the volume that's out there. It's impossible to respond to everything. Working with AI algorithms, natural language processing, we were able to put in systems that really monitored the environment and looked at key aspects of things, whether it's trajectory across platforms, other types of things that could figure out which are the issues that were going to blow up or go viral that we should respond to, and which are the ones that we just needed to let run their course and die out. So that was incredible because rather than trying to fly swat every single thing that came across the transom, we were able to really focus in on what are the issues that mattered at that point. And the last piece that I'll say is, the use, I really think it's changing the game in opinion polling and research and where you can go. About a year or so ago, we did a piece of research with a particular audience that we were finding challenges with, perception challenges. We did quantitative research and then we did focus groups to message test and understand how we could better connect. We were on a call with a vendor later that year talking about it, and they said, well, look, we've got a persona or we've got synthetic audiences, and let's bring one of those up right now that matches what you're doing. We were able to message test the same message, put it into the system, and get almost a verbatim response that we heard in the focus groups. So it was just crazy. And then eventually we ran a test, a blinded test of taking the survey we did, the focus group Q&A, and entering it into their system to see what kind of response. And it was just incredible to see. It really just mirrored everything that we did. and you're changing something from weeks of work and time to pull together to a matter of days, really. And eventually it'll be down to a matter of minutes or hours. So just fascinating. I think there's an endless use of AI in our field. I'm excited about it.
So, and I think you've also mentioned to me in the past in investor relations, you've also made a really big push.
Yep.
Maybe 'cause I think that's really critically important too, as so many people are kind of struggling with stock prices that are volatile today.
Yep.
Maybe you could share a little bit of thoughts on that too.
Yeah, what's interesting there, I mean, you think about all of the meetings that your investor relations team attends throughout the year, all of the speaking engagements for your leadership, whether it's at JP Morgan or other conferences, the Q&A that follows with that, the questions that happen. Working with an AI model of being able to take all of that, taking your earnings Q&A, taking the transcripts from those meetings, taking analyst reports and pulling all of those together gives you an opportunity to then, when it comes time for earnings, to say, to query what are the top questions we've been receiving, what are the topics we should be focusing on, and really helps you hone in on what's going to be important and what's going to matter. I mean, I think we've all done earnings preps where you look at every single, I've seen binders of messaging and Q&A that go down, but when you can start to whittle that down and really dig in on the questions that are going to matter for the quarter, it really helps you to just be more prepared.
So everybody's worried about losing jobs. We have a job report, all these job reports coming
Yep.
out that show that actually there is actually a decrease in jobs. What you're describing and what I've experienced is really that it makes us even more powerful. It makes us
Yeah.
more valuable. And I think, communications becomes an even more important function within an organization. And is that something that you've experienced in all these incredible tools that you just described?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think, look, while AI can actually do the survey, you know, you need to know what are the questions that are important to ask. How are we going to, what's really at top of mind? What are the issues? I think what it's shifting us to is more strategic advisors, which is really where, I feel that our career, our field really shines is when we are at the table as a strategic advisor. So I think that shift of, I look back, I mean, we all remember the days of clippings where we had to put together those clipping books and everyone worried about, well, okay, that moved over to technology. It didn't eliminate the jobs. It just shifted the focus to more impactful work and really more, enjoyable work for the folks that are doing it too. I mean, I don't think any of us really appreciated sitting there with a scissor cutting things out, but when you can dig in on more of the strategy and really think about where you can add value, I think it's exciting.
And I also feel like it helps us move more rapidly and make better decisions too.
Yeah.
So it's, not only that we can actually do more higher level work, but we're going to be better at whatever work we're engaged in,
Yeah.
as a result of the information that you described.
Yeah.
So, and I
Absolutely.
just want to ask yourself personally, I mean, do you use AI in your everyday life yourself as well?
I do. I do. I use ChatGPT. Copilot became my best friend for a while there too. And it was just, whether it's just refining a document when you're working on something, doing research and really digging in on what are the issues and the challenges that, we're facing or another company is facing, I find it refreshing. I've even used it for recipes of trying to mix and match recipes and think about things in my own person. I love to cook, and it's kind of fun to experiment and see what ChatGPT comes up with and how that compares to the recipes I love working with. So I think there's lots of use for it.
So I think, another area which has had very, very dramatic shifts, when we all started out, celebrities and authorities were
Yeah,
the people that we would actually seek out as the ones to really help us in our programming. But now we see these small, micro and nano
yeah.
influencers really come to the fore. So what happened there and how does that look and what is the advantage of that?
No, I think you hit it on the nail on the head there. I mean, I think we all looked at the large celebrities. And I think, look, we originally looked at patient populations and tried to find what are the common denominators across the groups? What are the areas that we can appeal to? And then finding a celebrity that appealed to as much as possible across that spectrum. And it doesn't mean that celebrity campaigns are not going to continue because in some cases there is a lot of value to them, particularly if they can reach a lot of different audiences. But what we're seeing now in the shift to micro influencers is really an understanding that no patient population is just, similar across the board. You've got different cultural nuances, you've got socioeconomic differences, you even have physiological differences in different patient populations that they experience a disease in a different way. So the ability to move to micro influencers and really dig in and understand and target more content to patients that are really going to use it, right? The information that they need, and help them make the decisions that they need to make in their disease journey, I think is critical. There's a lot of opportunity here. I've seen a lot of shifting of marketing resources from the bigger campaigns to these more targeted influencer campaigns. And I think to your point about AI before, we're also seeing a lot of the use of AI and how that carries over into it. You know, you think about, as you identified a celebrity, you would identify the celebrity, you would look at their background, look at all of their, social media, what have they done, what have they said? And then, of course, it became that issue of monitoring that celebrity. And we've all had those horror stories of celebrity that goes rogue, and you've got to now back into it. With AI, we're able to dig in and even identify these micro influencers that will connect to the specific segmented audiences we're trying to look at. And then also using AI to vet them, to go through all of their background and understand what they've said and where the issues are. And then most importantly, when you're working with, 30 or 40 different micro influencers, it's a lot to monitor. So the use of AI and tools and be able to monitor across that, seeing if there's any issues that need to be responded to or that we can kind of let slide or other things. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And I wouldn't be surprised with all of the pressure on television, DTC advertising. Look, the return on that and the issues that we have, and we've even seen it in polling with physicians. Physicians hate this type of work, but if you can connect more with patients through micro influencers, I think it's a win-win all around.
Totally, and I think it's part of the trend of people wanting to and trusting people who are just like them, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
personal relevance is so incredibly important, and then if somebody went through an experience that's similar to mine, I'm
Yep.
more likely to, feel comfortable following their advice than necessarily a high authority. Even though I'm interested, I may watch it,
Yeah.
but it doesn't actually motivate action or behavior change. And of course, for us as communicators, it's great that today we can actually show KPIs that show behavior change and impact.
Hmm.
And these micro influence really do help us because it shows this connection that leads to an action much more readily. Um, but when we
Absolutely.
talk about sort of micro influencers and the personal relevance factor, I can't help but ask you because you were there through the whole thing for the pandemic. I mean,
Oh
and just what
gosh.
you went through. I was one of those people who stood on the line for the Pfizer vaccine in the snow for 2 hours waiting to get
Thank you,
my
Kathy.
shot. And asking, was it the Pfizer vaccine that I was getting?
Yes.
So what, how did you manage through that with all of the,
Yeah.
tensions and the, again, varying attitudes amongst the different communities? So how did you manage through that whole moment in time or
Wow.
period of time? We wish it were a moment, but it was longer.
Oh my gosh, there are so many lessons from the pandemic. It was just an incredible time to be at Pfizer and to work through everything that we dealt with. Someday maybe I'll even write a book on the whole thing. But I think there are three lessons that I think were really critical, that were important to our success and how we managed through that whole process. The three, one was that comms was at the table every step of the way, at every decision, whether it be small, minor, major, we were there at the table, which was critical. I think the second was the level of transparency that we committed to, and the shift in tone to more plain English. Those are a few things. And the third one was really kind of trying to take control of the narrative whenever possible. And I'll give you some examples on each of these just to kind of give you a sense. I mean, from comms being at the table, it was true from the beginning. And, our CEO came up with the concept of light speed, that we were going to, you don't produce a vaccine in 8 months without really eliminating all of the white space that's there. And for that, it was about having the right people at the table at every single point in time. And we created these sort of light speed task forces. I was part of two. I was part of the development task force, which was about 3 hours a day with the clinical trial team going through every aspect of recruitment, readouts, where we were, testing of samples every single step of the way. What are the things we needed to communicate? And the other one that I was lucky enough to be a part of, that Sally Sussman asked me to join, was the CEO's evening light speed call. And this was the executive leadership. It was a head of research, head of development, head of the CFO, head of manufacturing, and then some of the key players that were working to move things forward. Having comms there was critical because that call went through every aspect of the major decision making that was made, and almost many of those calls, I would say like the majority of them at the end, was also a turn to communications, really looking at, well, what are we communicating this year? What are the challenges? What's the messaging? Where are we at? And I think it was being every step of the way that was part of it. And then I was able to do a call with my team of 20 communicators and some of our agency partners every morning. We'd review everything that happened the day before, plan for everything that had to happen that day and the weeks forward. So it was really having the right information that helped us with that. So I think that was critical. I think the point of transparency was something that we committed to from day one. We put out what we call the 5 point plan, and a big point of that plan was data sharing. And that was something that we committed to. Every piece of data that we put together, whether it was preclinical, clinical, went live on preprint servers almost immediately once we had it. It was kind of putting that through. And I think the biggest thing was the publishing of the clinical trial protocol and the criticism that we were facing from KOLs about, is this the right study? Are these the right endpoints? Once we published that protocol, all of that criticism disappeared and they really understood where we were going with the program. So that was key. And then the plain English piece, really the explainers of what is mRNA, how do clinical trials run, our Science Will Win campaign that we launched during the pandemic to get people to understand the passion and commitment of the scientists that were working on these things, I think was critical in moving that forward. I think the last part is taking control of the narrative. And it's easier said than done. We all say you need to take control of the narrative, but just two examples, and there were many, but two that I'll mention. In the summer when the presidential election and the political rhetoric was kicking up, it was August. Our CEO and a few of the other CEOs looked at, could we do a vaccine makers pledge? And we worked to really create something that committed to following the science, following the regulatory process. We launched that in September with 9 CEOs signed on to it. And it really helped, you know, ease some of the criticism that we were facing. But if you fast forward again till October, now we're in throes of the election, it's getting close. We were getting a lot of criticism. Pfizer was getting closer to having a vaccine readout. And we decided we were going to do an op-ed for our CEO to, again, recommit to following the science, looking at this. The crazy part is no publication would take this op-ed because what we were trying to do was rise above the political rhetoric. And what these publications wanted was a little more criticism of one side or the other. And how would we do that? So we took control of it. We turned the op-ed into a letter to colleagues. We sent it out to colleagues. We published it online. And every one of these publications that refused to publish the op-ed were reporting on it in real time as news. So it's kind of like, look at the tools that you have to be able to own the narrative as much as you can. And I think those were just a few of the examples. I mean, like I said, it was an incredible time to be at Pfizer. It was an incredible time to work through that whole process and something that I will remember my entire
Forever.
career. Yeah.
Well, so you were hugely successful, and a lot of people give thanks to you. I know I was on a very small group, a Wall Street Journal hosted discussion. Albert Bourla was part of it, as was Sheryl Sandberg. And she said, Albert, I want to thank you for saving my father. And it
Uh,
was a moment where everybody just, you really just stopped.
it, it,
So congratulations to you and
oh,
your team for everything that you did. But let me just say that you inherited a problem, right? Because you were so successful and the pandemic revenue was so strong. And then, of course, the pandemic ended. And then you had to figure out how you were going to turn this tremendous success in what Pfizer had achieved in its science and in this incredible project that you delivered on. How do you transform that both internally and externally into something that drives the future of the company? And I think your science focus, if you can talk a little bit about that and what you did there, was really also very impressive.
Yeah, no, I think the focus on science has always been critical. I mean, I came into Pfizer in a R&D communications role. So really getting to know the scientists, working through everything. How do you bring the science to life every step of the way? And I think that's one of the things that we have continued to focus on. I think after the pandemic, I think there were two things that we had to work through. I mentioned the misinformation and disinformation and really trying to combat that, trying to avoid bleed over into other populations. I think that was really critical. But how do you bring to life the pipeline? How do you get people excited about it? A lot of it is the storytelling that we did. It's obviously the milestones and the data readouts are what the investor and analyst communities are looking at. But with broader populations, it's the passion of the scientists behind the work that are really advancing these promising therapies, the impact that they have, the potential they could have on patients. Everything from a series that we've run called Dear Scientist that we ran with the Boston Globe for years, which paired a patient with a scientist to talk about their condition and the work that we were doing, to just other explainer videos and things that really just bring it to life. We revamped the entire pipeline page to make it more exciting and interesting and help you dig deeper and go deeper into the website to find more content. There were so many different things that we did just to kind of keep the science front and center, I think was important.
Well, I love that focus on scientists, real scientists, and I even have to say I love your TikTok scientist videos. Um, you know,
Yeah,
you're following your lessons of the pandemic, real life, real people,
yeah,
just
yeah,
like it is, and being totally transparent.
yeah.
And really, I must say, being a pioneer and utilizing that platform. So you continue to like be frontier in terms of your ways to bring the science to life. So I just have to, end on asking you one more question, Ed, which is
Sure.
what's next? I mean, like you've been through so much, you've talked about so many
Oh
changes.
my gosh.
Yeah, you've described such great efforts, but where are we headed and what's on the horizon for healthcare? We have so many problems we all know about,
Yeah.
but what can we look forward to?
Look, AI we've talked about. I mean, I think there's so much promise there and what can happen. But I think you're absolutely right. The industry just faces so many challenges, whether it's the political pressures of accusing the industry of just being out for profits and greedy, or it's the anti-science movement and the belief in conspiracy theories and wanting to take us back to the dark ages. It's so easy to get disheartened and distracted and focused on that. But I like to stay focused on what our industry does and where the opportunity is. One of the most impactful moments in my career was being on the call when we had the readout for the vaccine and really seeing firsthand what science can do and where it's going. And I like to think about, there is a communicator out there right now that is going to be on that call when they find an Alzheimer's drug that is going to turn that disease into a dreaded one, into a chronic disease, living years and decades later. The same with different cancers, different rare diseases. We have the opportunity to be at the table for these incredible moments. We work in an industry that is producing miracles. And I think for me, that's both humbling and exciting. And I think if we focus on where science is going, I think we're going to see even more of this in the future. So, what I'm excited about is the future of science and how communications can continue to play a role in bringing these breakthroughs forward and getting patients connected to them.
Well, I share your tremendous optimism, and I know now after all these long years and what we've shared in terms of the almost decades, not quite, is that no innovation gets anywhere without communication.
It's
You
true.
know, communication needs to bring it to the right, professionals to use it, to the right patients to accept it. So I think our function and our careers and our industry has a wonderful opportunity ahead of us to tell those incredible stories that you just talked about. And I am really excited about the Alzheimer's cure telephone call, which I think we're all waiting to hear as well as
I think
many of those
so.
other
That'll be wonderful.
answers. Thank you so much, Ed. It's been amazing to talk to you. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks, Kathy. It's always wonderful talking to you too.